awkward pause where I realized I came on the stage way too early. Like, oh no, I wasn't supposed to come up till that was done. My name's Jason. I get to be one of the pastors here. Welcome to Church in the Wild. If you do not have a church or if you are a long-time regular here, you matter, and we are so glad that you chose to worship with us today. I want to encourage all of you to join us Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve is going to be a really fun service. We got some really great stuff planned for the kiddos. And Lance is preaching that day, so I'm excited. No, I'm playing. Lance just full-on panicked. Right? What? I'm so excited to have you all today. I love that video. Josh put that together, and Josh is sick right now, so I feel like, as are many, but I feel like we should give Josh a round of applause for making the video. Josh is texting me. There was many people today texting me like, dude, I am so sick. And so tis the season. Most wonderful time of the year, flu season. We're all here. So what I love about that video, what I love about Christmas, what I love about Isaiah 35 is that it's all about hope. It's all about hope. And hope is a very important part of Christmas. It's why I love Christmas. Christmas is a season of hope. It's the season that reminds us that it's okay to hope again. And that's important because we live in a hopeless world. Recently, a study was done by people a lot smarter than me who said that the average American thinks somewhere between 4,000 to 4,500 thoughts per day. And 4 out of 5 of those are negative. And they said that it's not reality. We've been taught to say, well, that's reality. I just see the world as it really is. I don't look through rose-colored glasses. You're just an optimist. I'm a realist. But those same people said, actually, there is no reality when it comes to looking at the world. You just look at it the way that you trained yourself to look at it. You either look at it with hope or without hope. And you do so because of events that happened all through your life, all through things that happen to you, all through things you've been taught. For instance, the more you look at social media, the earlier as a person you look at social media, the more likely you are to have negative thoughts directly impact you, the more likely you are to be depressed or anxious. All of those things are things that are training our brains, training our minds to look at the world without hope. And then Christmas comes along, and it's this beautiful, wonderful season with songs about hope and movies about hope and stories about hope and even gifts and all the stuff that gives us hope again. And that's what I love so much about Christmas season. I am an absolute Christmas freak. I will watch every Christmas movie. I will listen to every Christmas song. I will do all the Christmas things because Christmas is a season that reminds us it's okay to have hope again. And I think Isaiah chapter 11 sums that up in the best possible way. But it does so in a very interesting way. Have you ever met someone who the first thing they ever said to you was like kind of rude, and then you later on were like, actually, they're super nice? You ever met that person where you're like, I don't like you upon meeting you? And then later on, you're like, oh, it turns out that was just we got off on the wrong foot. One of my best friends is a guy named Brett, and Brett and my buddy Gerald and I are like in a group chat, and we've been in this group chat since college. And the first time I ever met Brett, we were playing football, and I was like, you and me are not going to get along. This is not going to go well for you. And it didn't go well for me, it turned out. And I was like, buddy, we just right off the bat, we were like at each other. And it turns out it's just because we're both super competitive. And now 10, 15 years later, we're close friends. Isaiah chapter 11 begins kind of like that first introductory meeting to someone where you're like, I don't like what you have to say. And it closes full of hope. So let's look at Isaiah chapter 11, verse 1. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse. Amen, Jesse. And a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. Now again, when you read this, we'll talk about this in a minute, but when you read that, if you're the children of Israel, you're like, really, bro? But let's keep reading. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom, understanding, spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. And his delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see or decide disputes by what his ears hear. That alone should give us hope. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt of his waist, and faithfulness the belt of his loins. The wolf, this is where it gets so interesting. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb. The leopard shall lie down with the young goat. The calf and the lion and the fattened calf together. And a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze. Their young shall lie down together. And the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the cobra. The weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. And then he links verse 10 back to verse 1. In that day the root, but notice the change from shoot to root of Jesse, who shall stand as a signal for the peoples. Of him shall the nations inquire, and his resting place shall be glorious. Now that chapter is like one of those chapters that when you read it, you're like, oh yeah. Like I read that chapter and I get pumped because that's talking about the day, right, when Jesus comes, and we look at that and we read that and we're like, yeah, I know what he's talking about. But imagine being the children of Israel. And you have placed all of your hope in a man named David and his descendants. Everything to them depended upon the king being a direct descendant of David. Everything. And along comes Isaiah and he says, hey, that guy that you have all your hope in, he's going to be cut off like a stump. Completely removed. You got all your hope in someone being directly descended from David? Well, let me just tell you right off the bat, it's going to be cut down. Now, this is important. Like here in America, we don't quite view people as kings like they did, but this is like me letting someone get up this week, and they get up and they say, hey, y'all got hope in your money this year? Well, let me tell you, the economy's going to crash in 2 weeks. You excited about that? We would hear that and be like, bro. Isaiah comes along. The king Uzziah has died. There's been another king, and then Hezekiah is coming on the scene, and Isaiah's like, hey, you got hope in David? You got hope in Jesse? Completely cut off. Completely removed. But don't worry, a shoot's going to come from the stump. Now, when you hear that again, we hear that like we say, oh yeah, well, we understand what he's talking about. But if you're going through the forest and you see a mighty tall tree that's bearing fruit, and you see a little small branch sticking out of the ground beside it, which one are you going to run to if a grizzly bear is chasing you? The tall, mighty, strong tree. And Isaiah says, hey, don't worry, guys. Don't worry. David's whole thing is going to be cut off, but don't worry. A shoot's going to come up out of that. And it will bear fruit. But again, if you're them, that means you got to wait a long time. How is this passage about hope? Well, I think this passage tells us that hope is rarely found where we are looking for it. Hope is rarely found where we are looking for it. See, he says there's a shoot coming from the stem. A branch from his roots shall bear fruit. The children of Israel had hope in a king. They had always had hope in a king. Even before David, they said, we need a king, we need a king, we need a king. David comes along and sums up everything that they think they need. And then Isaiah says, hey, he's going to be completely cut off. It's going to end. They're looking for hope in a king. And David really was their past, their present, and their future. And I think that's interesting because I think a lot of us look for hope in the same things. Right? A lot of us look to our past for hope. Like, well, if we can just get back to the good old days. We don't live in the good old days. There are people who have their hope in the future. You know, it's like the good Christian song, in the sweet by and by. Well, we live in the messy here and now. It's just reality. And there's even people who, man, as long as things are good, they had everything wrapped up as far as hope in one person, and that's not where their hope was actually going to be found. Hope sounded good when David was a king, but then Solomon comes along, and he starts to make some mistakes. Then there's a rebellion, and from there, the kingdom just starts to go down and down and down and down and down. And the last king that we know that comes in the Old Testament, we barely even hear his name, and he's gone and off the scene, literally cut off. We don't even know how he died. The kings that did stick around, at best, inconsistent, and at worst, pretty bad. So Isaiah comes along and says, if you're looking for hope in a person, you are looking for hope in the wrong places. And I find that maybe this is just me. Maybe I'm maybe the whole sermon's for me, but I find that I look for hope in all the wrong places too. I find that often, if I'm really honest with myself, I don't always put my hope in Jesus. I sing the song, all my hope is in Jesus. You know why I'm not on the worship team now? Praise God. Like I sing it loud, but then in reality, often my hope is either in people or in my past or in my performance. As long as I'm doing good, as long as I'm making money, I'm okay. Long as I've got this, I'm okay. Long as I'm handling things, I'm okay. Long as I got my family, I'm okay. Long as I got that relationship, I'm okay. Long as I got a person, I'm okay. Long as I got these people, I got my community, I'm okay. So often in our lives, we put our hope in all the wrong places. You want to put your hope in a person? At best, they will be inconsistent. And at worst, they will just be bad. I'm telling you, if you're trying to put your hope in a pastor, on my best day, I am inconsistent. And on my worst day, I'm just so unhealthy. You try to put your hope in your family, I try to be the best dad I can be, and on my best day, I'm inconsistent. You can't put your hope in people. But we seem to, here in America, like just look. We even do it in politically, like as long as this guy's president, then we're good. As long as my guy's winning or my lady's winning, as long as we got this political person, that's just another person. Relationships. I mean, we've looked for hope in so many wrong places. We got more dating sites than we've ever had, and yet we have more hopelessness than we've ever had. Why? Well, you can't find hope in a dating relationship. And if you are the hope of somebody, then that's a problem too. Because that means they're not putting their faith in Jesus like they should be. We put our hope in people. We put our hope in our past. We put our hope in our performance. All of those are good things. They're all fruit, right? He says, hey, the tree's cut down. They're all fruit. They're all good. But maybe we place our hope in our hard work. Hard work is really good, but it's not where our hope is found. Our skills. I find myself being guilty of this. Like, man, times are hard, but as long as I can preach on Sunday, I think God can. It's hope in myself, hope in my skills, hope in our gifts. Well, I'm gifted in this area. I'm gifted in this area. We put hope in our signs these days. I was born in July, so that means I got this, you know. We place hope in everything. Our money, our friends, our family, our people, all good things. But what happens to those good things when the wind blows? See, that tree, really good, really strong. But what happens when it blows and falls down? See, the truth is, and I need you to hear this, sometimes God removes so that we will root. Sometimes God removes so that we will root. And it's painful, and it's not fun, and it's not great to see the very thing that we placed our hope in taken away. But that's because we've placed hope in a thing or in a person, and God's trying to show us, hey, I need you to place all your hope in me. Root down firmly in me. God is the source of all of our hope, and sometimes he removes things. Your entire hope is in your job. What happens when that job's gone? Your entire hope's in the economy. What happens when you're spending $800 a month more right now? Your entire hope is in your health. What happens when you're not healthy? Sometimes God removes so that we will root. And often we fight this because we're like, you can't take that person out of my life. I need that person. And God's trying to say to us, no, you need to root down deeper in me. So I know this isn't super politically correct, so I'm sorry. But my brother shot a deer when I was up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and he asked me to come find it with him. And so we were like tracking it through the woods. And there was my dad, my brother, all of my nephews, which is like a small army. He's had a lot of kids, and we're all stomping through the woods trying to find this deer. And I stopped everyone and was like, whoa, stop. And they all thought I found the deer, but I found something else. And I stopped them all in the middle of this hunt, and I was like, Isaiah 11. And they're all like, what are you talking about? But I got a picture here. I want to show you the picture that I was able to take. So if it's hard to see, but this is a tree stump with a tree coming out of it. This is literally what he's talking about. This tree is cut off. It is removed. It is by all means dead. And a new tree is beginning to grow out of it. Why? Because it was rooted. It was rooted. It was dug down deep in hope. And life was there all along. We place our hopes in so many things, and sometimes God has to say, let me just take this and remove it from you, because I want you to understand that the hope is not found in the branches. The hope is not found in the fruit. This is probably a cedar tree, and it has like a ton of small things that, like pine cones that come off of it, and it feeds all kinds of animals around there, but hope was never found in that tree. Not ever. That little small branch growing up out of the stump that was completely cut off is only alive because it was rooted. And sometimes God removes so that we will root. Sometimes God says to us, your entire hope is in that vehicle. Let's just take that out of the scene, because I need you to realize that your hope should be found in me. Why? Not because God's evil, not because God's bad, but because God knows the best thing for this small branch was for it to find its true source of hope. It's the best, healthiest, happiest it's ever going to be because it found hope in its true source. Which leads us to point 2. Hope is found underneath. Hope is found underneath. It is what is under the surface that actually matters. So often when we search for hope, we are looking at topical things. We are looking for things at surface level, but life and growth occurs under the soil, under all the things that are going on. This is why no matter what, you can always have hope. Even when circumstances, even when situations are bad, even when times are difficult, even when David said, everyone is forsaken me, there's still hope underneath. Because if you're rooted down deep, you know where hope is. You can say like David, hey, you know what? I got hope no matter what. I might be cut off. I might be cut down. I might be cut back, but I'm going to come back. Why? Because I have hope in Jesus. And no matter what happens, my hope is buried deep and rooted deep in him. Number 3, hope is worth the wait. Hope is worth the wait. Jesus is going to come onto the scene somewhere between 400 and 700 years after this prophecy. Think about that. I mean, if I don't get an answer from my bank via text in 5 minutes, I'm like, everything's lost. We're doomed. 700 years, Isaiah says, hey, I know you're all cut off, but just wait. Just wait. Romans chapter 8, verse 22 says, for we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. Not only creation, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we are saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope. Who hopes for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. See, I think a lot of times we have the wrong idea of hope. I think we think hope is like if I were to say, I really hope the Detroit Lions win the Super Bowl this year. That's how we view hope, is like this kind of wishful positive thinking. Right? Like, man, I really hope that Dak Prescott is the MVP this year because I think he deserves it and he wears Jordans and I like those. That's how we view hope, is like this. And I really hope I get asked out. I really hope I get that Christmas gift. I got my Christmas. We view hope like that, like it's something like positive, wishful thinking. But that's not actually what biblical hope is. Biblical hope is like an expectant waiting. It's like, you know what? I already know that it's going to take a while, but I'm going to do right until it comes to pass. In fact, I'm going to say this twice because I want you to hear this. Jesus rarely reveals himself to or through rushed people. Jesus rarely reveals himself to or through rushed, hurried people. Think about the Bible. Abraham is promised, you're going to have all these children. And he rushes. And what happens? We have fighting today because he rushed. But he waits a while, and God comes through. Think about Noah. Hey, I'm going to flood the earth. Okay. What do you want me to do? Build a boat. Okay. For the next 100 years. What? Like, how long is it going to take to build this thing? As long as it takes. But it's worth the wait. Moses comes along. Hey, I'm going to rescue the children of Israel by myself. I'm going to rush into this. Actually, now you're going to have to go wait in the wilderness for 40 years. You're going to have to take care of sheep for 40 years before the burning bush. See, if we get our theology from Prince of Egypt, we have a really fun theology, but it's not actually biblically accurate. 40 years Moses is wandering around in a wilderness. How many of you get upset waiting 40 minutes for your coffee? Yeah. 40 years. David is promised as a kid, you're going to be the king. You know, before he was king, he was a criminal. God rarely reveals himself to or through rushed, hurried people. Jesus comes along, the Son of God. And you don't even hear much about him until he turns 30. Now, if anyone was equipped to handle stuff at any point in life, it was him. And yet the very Son of God is waiting and waiting and waiting to fulfill the task God has for him. We can wait until we're 30 to have the children that we want. We can wait until we're 30 to get married. You can wait. We can hang on and expectantly wait for God to reveal himself. I want a house and I want it now. Just wait. God's coming through. God will come through. I want to get better now. God's coming through. Just wait. God rarely reveals himself to or through rushed people. In fact, what's so interesting about the biblical story is you have like 700 years since Isaiah says this, and then all of a sudden you have this guy named Zechariah, and we find Zechariah doing what? He's in the temple daily doing the very thing that God has asked him to do. You know what he's doing? He's doing right while he's waiting, and that is hope. We find Elizabeth doing right while she waits. When we hear about Joseph, Joseph is doing the only right thing he knows to do while he waits for the deliverer. Joseph, who should be the king of Israel, is waiting for God and yet doing right. Mary comes along, and what does she say? Be it unto your servant as you want. Doing right while waiting is hope. And this is hard because no one in our culture does this. No one in our culture does this, and so we've got to be the people who do it. There's two people in the temple, Simeon and Anna. Simeon and Anna. They have been in the temple waiting for God to just show them something. This is 700 plus years after Isaiah says, hey, everything's going to be cut off, but a shoot's going to start to grow. And they're in the temple doing right, waiting. Why? Because it's worth the wait. It's worth the wait. So I grew up in this kind of bizarre world as a pastor's kid. Pray for me. Poor Leslie has to hear my trauma when she's trying to coach me. She's like, let's coach. And I'm like, I just need therapy. Right? I grew up as a pastor's kid, and it's weird. And there's like this bizarre expectation that you need to marry a pastor's daughter if you're a pastor's son because they're the only one who are going to understand you. And I kind of can see that. But had I rushed into a relationship and not waited for God, I look at the relationships I was in, and I'm like, my wife is so infinitely better than anything I hoped, imagined, or prayed for. She was worth the wait. Worth the wait. Hope is worth the wait. We had 3 miscarriages before we had Isla. Each one was more devastating, more devastating, more devastating. But Isla today came running in the building and came to the back and hugged me. Worth the wait. Worth the wait. That thing you are hoping for is worth waiting. Don't rush into a mistake because you're getting impatient waiting on God. Hope is worth the wait. Don't take the job just because you got to have a job. Take the job that God gives you because it will be so infinitely be better than anything you hoped, thought, or imagined when He does come through. But He rarely reveals Himself to people who are like, Jesus, you better show me now. That's not how He operated. That's not how He worked. All throughout the narrative of Jesus, we find the disciples continually frustrated with Him because He's never in a hurry. They're like, Lazarus is dying. Okay, let's wait 3 days. What? Yeah, let's wait till he really smells. Like, I don't want this to seem like, I want it to be 3 days. He rarely reveals Himself to or through hurried people. This is why we can't get our theology off of Instagram. I am sure those reels are really cool, and that person has a cool hat on, and I'm sure they got a microphone in their face, and they sound real great. Don't base your theology off of 15 seconds from someone you don't know personally. Because they're hurried, and you're hurried. And so something at 2 a.m. on TikTok can destroy your life. There are worse things to TikTok than just, well, you can't watch it because of the bad stuff. There's also hurried people saying things that should not be drawn theology from. TikTok, do what you want with it, but don't base your theology off of an Instagram reel you saw at 2 a.m. because you prayed, God, show me an answer. And then this guy was like, drop everything and get rid of everyone in your life, and you started texting people, you're gone. That's a bad idea. Jesus rarely reveals Himself to or through hurried people. After hundreds of years, shepherds were hopefully waiting on a hillside. And I know everyone wants to fight about the wise men. Like, we fight about the weirdest thing as Christians. They weren't there. You can't prove it. We can't prove they weren't. So let's not fight about it. What we do know is for hundreds of years, wise men had been studying stars, waiting for that one star. And when they saw it, they followed it. Whether they showed up and we have the picture perfect thing or not doesn't matter. What matters is that for years they had looked because they had read Daniel, they had studied Daniel, and they said, someday there will be signs in the heaven, and we are waiting and studying and waiting and studying and waiting and studying, and there it is. But He rarely reveals Himself to or through hurried people. And this is important because number 4, hope is so much better than what we think. Hope is so much better than what we think. Think about what Isaiah is saying to them. Isaiah is saying to them, you want a king, but instead, I'm going to give you a kingdom. Think about that. Think about what he says. You want a tree, but God has a forest. I don't know who needs to hear this today, But don't settle for fruit when God wants to give you an entire forest. Don't settle for fruit when God has a forest. Fruit's really good, really wonderful. You know what's better? A forest full of fruit. One apple versus hundreds of apples, the hundreds of apples win. But so often in our life, we settle for fruit because we're not willing to wait for the forest. God had an entire forest for them. Look at Isaiah chapter 11 again, and we'll read it and we'll just walk through it because you need to hear this. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse. So there was one tree. A branch from his roots shall bear fruit. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him. Okay, that's a positive. The Spirit of wisdom and understanding, that's a positive. The Spirit of counsel and might, that's a positive. The Spirit of knowledge and fear of the Lord, that's another positive. Right off the bat, we had either a bad or inconsistent king, or now we've got this guy who the Spirit is all over him. And his delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see. Anybody ever been judged by what someone saw? You appreciate this verse right here. Or decide disputes by what his ears hear. Anybody ever have someone decide something based off of what they heard about you but never asked you? You appreciate this verse right here. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor. That sounds pretty good. And he shall strike and decide for equity with equity for the meek of the earth. That sounds pretty great. Already, this is so much more than a David who shows up and murders someone. Already. But we can keep going. And he shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt of his waist. You know what that means? That means that his appetites do not control him. That means he's not a king who's ruled by his appetites. Do you know what that means? That means he's so much better than David, who was like, hot woman, you're with me. I'm going to go ahead and kill your husband. This guy, so much better. And faithfulness, the belt of his loins, no appetites are controlling this man. He is a holy, righteous king. Then the wolf shall dwell with the lamb. Man, in a time of war, that sounds pretty positive to me. The leopard shall lie down with the young goat. The calf and the lion, and then he adds this in because this is so important. The calf, the lion, and the fattened calf together. Why is he adding that? Well, because where I grew up, we have mountain lions. And you know what mountain lions do? They wait until there is a fat, pregnant, ready to have a baby cow. And that's the one they go after. And he's saying it don't even matter the condition. It don't matter if you're like ready. It doesn't matter whatever. God is going to bring peace to everyone. The leopard shall lie down with the young goat, the calf, the lion, the fattened calf together, and a little child shall lead them. Instead of an arrogant king trying to rule, you have a holy little child bringing peace. I read that, and then I watch debates on television, and I'm like, can we have the little child, please? These guys just act like children, and that's an actual child. The cow and the bear shall graze. The young shall lie down together. The lion shall eat straw like the ox. If you have little children, the nursing child shall play over the hole of the cobra. You know what that means? Absolute peace. You have no fear when Jesus is in control. The weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den. They shall not hurt or destroy in all of my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord. What Isaiah is saying, hey, y'all want to place your hope in one tree? It gives you a little bit of fruit. But finish the chapter, and I got an entire forest full of the knowledge of God for you. When you place your hope in God, it is so much better. It is so much worth the wait than just another bad, inconsistent king. When you place your hope, listen, my wife is so much better than another dating app that I could have gotten on and swiped right or left. Why? Because God's plan is always so much better. When we place our hope in Him, it's infinitely better. So much better than just fruit. So much better than just another bad king. So much better than just another lousy relationship, and now you're singing Last Christmas I Gave You My Heart again. So much better than Christmas Eve alone. So much better. Why? Because number 5, hope is all about who? Hope is all about who? Hope is not about how. You place your hope in how God's going to deliver you. Well, God better deliver me this way. Hope is about God delivering you. It's not about him delivering you the way that you think he has to do it. Hope is about who. It's not about even when. God, you better come through for me. It's almost Christmas. When God does come through, it's so much better. But hope is about him. And that means you might have to wait a while for him to come through. Because what he sees is all the things going on around, and he sees all of the stuff, and he's picking the best, most perfect, opportune moment to come through for you. And it might not feel that way, and it might seem like, I am waiting forever, God. And God said, yeah, but to me, 1,000 years is like a moment. So just wait. It's not about when, it's not about what, it's not about how, it's not even about why. Hope is entirely about Jesus. Worship team, you guys can come up here. Hope is entirely about a manger. This is what I love about the manger. It reminds me that there's hope. That's why I love Christmas music. It reminds me of hope. This is why I love Christmas songs, Christmas stuff. That's why every time I see anything associated with, think about just the holly and the ivy, it's telling us that there's hope even in dark, dreary seasons, because those holly and ivy still bear fruit in the darkest seasons of life. Hope is about a man named Jesus Christ. And whether or not the shepherds, there was 3 shepherds and they were kneeling, whether or not there was wise men, whether or not all that stuff, we know one thing. Jesus saved us and brought us hope. And he has hope even in your darkest seasons. Hope even in your darkest times. Whatever you're going through, there's hope because there's Jesus. I'm going to ask you all to stand to your feet today. Maybe it's time for you to put your hope in Christ.